the East End of Long Island. It has the distinction of being a playground for the wealthy and the elite. But within the protective enclaves, behind the privet hedges lies another reality. Cutting through social class, economic privilege, and racial lines, domestic violence touches nearly everyone. A victim can be the wife of an estate owner, the girlfriend of a gardener, or the daughter of a school teacher.
And there was an incident, two incidents in particular that I can remember, but one where my husband had me down on the floor and he was threatening to kill me. He had my arm bent down and he was holding me down. He was going to break my arm. And my daughter was sitting 2 feet away from me watching TV and never looked up, never even witnessed what was going on. That was normal to her. I realized it didn't affect her at all because that's what she was used to.
Started smacking and beating me, and it got to the point where he broke my hand. And oh boy, that's when I said I was already looking for help anyway, but I knew that I had to get out. And then when I saw him, turning to my kids, I said, no, this is it. I'm gonna leave.
I didn't want anybody to know. I just didn't want anybody to know. The only one I would have told was my doctor. And I had wished that he would ask me, but I never would have told him.
But he would have such control not to hit me in the face, so that way no one would know. It was a big secret, and he could keep it that way. So I would go to work in long-sleeve shirts and turtlenecks.
I wouldn't let anybody know. In fact, when it all did come out, everybody was very surprised. Because when I had the black and blues and that, I didn't go out. I didn't go anyplace.
Somehow, I got away from him. I don't know how, and I tried to call the police, and he grabbed the phone, and he picked up an iron pipe that we had to put on the back door to keep the back door locked, and a pair of scissors. And he just walked around the room, and he just breathed really heavy, and he said, if anybody comes down, I'm gonna kill you. I swear I'm gonna kill you. And I'm like, oh my God, all I can think of was my children and how this man would start to just smash my head in or just start to stab me, and they'd find my body and they'd never ever know what happened.
Lying to people about bruises or places or loud voices, neighbors, anything going on, you could talk to us. No, we just were fighting, that's it. No big deal.
How does one community break the silence of domestic violence? We'll ask survivors and batterers, judges and advocates, police officers and doctors. They'll give us their perspective on the problem. Where does the existing system fail? Why are we taught to cover up violence in our homes? And how do we stop it? These questions, like the problem itself, go on and on. But where do the answers begin?
As parents, we teach our children about strangers and going out alone after dark, but we never tell them of the possible danger in our homes. The statistics on domestic violence clearly prove this. According to the U.S. Surgeon General, domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women between the ages of 15 and 45, more than rapes, muggings, and auto accidents combined. Every 15 seconds, a woman is beaten in the United States.
For every 911 call for help, 3 others never make that first step. The violence remains a hidden and terrorizing factor in the day-to-day lives of these women and their children. According to experts, the violence occurs because the abuser wants to control, dominate, bully the victim. Meanwhile, society blames the victim for putting up with it. Their self-esteem is peeled away layer by layer, and in their isolated world, they become too fearful to reveal the truth.
And I also hear them describe keeping secrets. I'm told not to tell anybody about what's going on in the house. And that's by both the victim and the abuser. They say, keep the secret, don't tell anyone, this is our family business. And in working with the children, I let them know they can't keep secrets where somebody's being hurt or when they're being hurt. The batterers, yes, can be very controlling, and oftentimes if they abuse the wife, they also in some way are abusing the children. Physically, emotionally, and sometimes, unfortunately, sexually also.
the point, of course, again, is to get the children to behave as they want them to behave. So commonly, batterers will punish children for being noisy or for crying or for being ill. I mean, they just don't get what it is to be a father to a little person. So that there's a good deal of that goes on, and then that, of course, puts the mother in a terrible situation, because she's afraid that if she reports this kind of treatment of the children, she will lose the children.
You know, what goes on inside these walls stays here, that kind of thing. So one of the first things we have to do is breach that. You know, that's the denial, is to try to penetrate or undermine the denial.
It's all part of the control, and it's part of making the woman feel even crazier, because she knows the truth. She knows how he yells and throws things and is violent and abusive. But if she tells someone, they say, "Oh, come on. Not good old Harry. You've got to be kidding. You must be exaggerating. I can't believe that."
He needed to control us. That was his issue. He needed to control everyone in his family, under his roof. And by his way of doing that would be to get rid of your self-esteem. It made me feel very insecure. Name-calling, putting down, you're not, you're stupid. You'll never do anything. You'll never be anyone. Nobody would want you.
I always make excuses for any little thing. He's like my little brother. I have to protect him, And anything, like if he smacked me, he had a bad day. It'll pass. And I had to set up the atmosphere so as soon as he walked in the door, everybody had to be happy. That way, Daddy won't have an excuse to be mad. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Regardless if you're happy, if not, if he's going to do something, he's going to do it regardless of what the situation would be. We could be the happiest people pretending to be the happiest people in the world, and that wasn't enough for him.
In my 8th month of pregnancy, he pushed me down in the bedroom and kicked me under the bed. And that was the first time he hit me since, right before we were married. But I suffered a lot of deprecation from him. He deprecated me a lot.
And something wasn't right. I just had this feeling. The car was kind of parked into the fence, and I went in and he was asleep, and I woke him up to see what happened. Something was wrong, and he just snapped. He just completely lost it and just started pummeling me. He was just punching me and punching me. And not even making any sense. It wasn't like he was saying I had done something. He just completely lost control. And I ran out of the house, and he chased me, and he grabbed me by my hair and dragged me down the street. And all I kept thinking the whole time was, I can't scream, because someone will know. And I remember my next door neighbor was a Suffolk County cop at the time, and I just didn't want them to know. If someone knew, they would blame me, and they would know that I should have left and everything that I should have done wrong, instead of blaming the abuser.
Where does the violence occur?
According to the Center for Disease Control, a woman is 9 times more likely to be hurt in her home than on the street.
I had a woman come in here with her father, hysterical, weeping, crying, afraid. "Judge, he's going to kill me." Those were her exact words. "Please protect me. Please help me." I issued the order. We had her give us the particulars. Please don't serve him at his job. It will humiliate him. We made sure we wouldn't do that. 2 days later, she came in here with her husband, demanding to have the charges dropped, incensed at me when I refused to do it.
Batterers actually use whatever techniques seem handiest and most effective to get their own way. And sometimes that means physical violence. Sometimes it means sexual violence. Sometimes it means threats and intimidation, yelling, name-calling. Sometimes it means other kinds of very graphic threats. Batterers often kill family pets or threaten to. They destroy property. They throw scenes and smash up the car or smash up the house as a demonstration of what will happen to the woman next if she doesn't behave. But on the other hand, there are all sorts of other coercive behaviors that are deceptive, because we tend to think of them as good behaviors, nice behaviors, even romantic behaviors. That is flattery, seduction, buying presents, sending flowers, professing to be sorry for having beaten her up yesterday, faking remorse, all those so-called good behaviors that are designed really to seduce the woman back into the relationship, to make her hope that indeed the man is sorry and will change his behavior, and she will be able to have again what she wants, and that is a relationship without violence.
What are the warning signs of violent behavior? It's important for women to identify the warning signs of abusive and violent behavior, but it's especially important for our professionals in schools and hospitals to recognize it. With so much shame and fear, these questions are not easily raised or answered.
Nobody would have ever guessed that I was, going through this. I would never tell anybody. You just keep it hidden, that's all. You just smile all the time,
I mean, a lot of people don't realize that domestic violence is the biggest threat to women's health today, that every year 4 to 6 million women are battered or assaulted by their partners, and a third of those women are battered so severely that they have to have medical attention.
What I'm speaking about is somebody, for example, may have come in and received an injury to the eye that may be obvious because there's a black eye, but they may not tell you that before they were punched in the eye, they were thrown down a flight of stairs, which may have resulted in some pain in their leg that actually is representing a fracture, or that they were punched in the abdomen, which may represent a problem that actually is there causing pain, but which they don't really want to talk about because they want to keep it quiet.
Up to 35% of all women who visit emergency rooms are there for injuries related to domestic abuse.
With injuries that are sustained as a result of violence, it's sometimes problematic for the individual who has been injured to give all of the information freely, and so they may hold back. And in holding back may make it difficult to do a proper evaluation.
If a woman is frightened or she feels intimidated, wants to rush through, or the abuser is pushing his way into the emergency room and wants her not to tell, essentially not to tell what's going on, then that's a key.
In a particular case, the wife calls, police responded, sees we were dealing with the husband in a rather forceful manner, and she then turned and started throwing food at us. And you try to counter that with, we're here to help, but it's not perceived as that. It's now, again, this presence has come in, it's no longer wanted.
After the batterer is caught and arrested, a debate fires up between the police, the newspapers, and advocates for victims' rights. Should the batterer's crime and the name of the victim be published in the newspaper? Does this put the victim in greater danger?
Our domestic incidents are not something that we give out. If it's, it's not part of the information that released to the press, and that's really, after many times of the victim being victimized, more than once. Here they are, their names in the newspaper, and they go through the same process again, so we don't release them.
If you don't put in the victims' names, how can you put in the perpetrator, so-called, the alleged perpetrator's name? Because this is a small town. Are you going to say John Jones beat up somebody, but not say it's a wife? Or it means you can't put in the alleged perpetrator's name either. And so that got us into really thinking seriously about why should we treat this class of violators and victims differently than anybody else. And we really came to the conclusion that we shouldn't.
I think that's horrible that the newspaper does that, because number one, it probably keeps women from coming out, because the embarrassment is so terrible that would keep a woman from calling the police. That would keep her in a battering situation.
Women may very well be more vulnerable then if that publication is not accompanied by some kind of punishment.
Why do batterers batter? How is the batterer's behavior rationalized? Excuses you're likely to hear include, it's the woman's fault, Or maybe something just snapped. He had a bad day and he'll get through this. Or maybe it was drugs or alcohol that made him do it.
I thought if I were doing the right thing, this man would be fine. He'd be happy with me. You know, if I baked good chocolate cake, man, he'd be okay. But I wasn't getting that chocolate cake right, you know? I just wasn't getting it right. Didn't matter which recipe, and I tried them all. They were just not right.
It didn't take alcohol or drugs anymore. It just took the dynamic of fear. He knew I was afraid, and he used that to put me in my place. The more afraid I was, the more he gained control of me, and the more he would try to gain control of me, and however that came out, whether it were physical, emotional, verbal, sexual abuse, it escalated and escalated to the point where it didn't matter. It didn't matter if you were drinking, if there were drugs. It was whenever. When it gets to that point, then you really are always afraid. Always, always afraid, because you can't say, well, tonight he's not drunk, so I'm safe. You just have to walk around the house like there's a monster there and tiptoe around and always watch and always be afraid and always be aware, because this person could snap at any time and you can be in danger.
The notion that the man just got angry, that because of his wife's behavior or because of stress from life in general, he lost his temper and exploded and then afterwards was sorry for it. Men say this all the time, and they also attribute this loss of control to drink or to drugs. You know, I was high, I wasn't myself. But the problem, as we know it, is not a loss of control. The problem is that the man is perfectly in control and he's exercising that control. He uses these other things like an explosion of temper, an explosion of anger, drugs, alcohol, as simply an excuse to explain after the fact what he did quite deliberately. And if you doubt that, you have only to look at the classic example that, I mean, why is it that the man always loses his temper with his wife? Why doesn't he beat up his boss? Why doesn't he beat up the cop who comes to the house? Why doesn't he beat up the judge?
How does domestic violence affect children? Will they grow up to be violent? Is violence a learned behavior?
We see a wide range of reactions to domestic violence. It really depends on the age of the child, sometimes their sex, and really where they are in the family. But it can be anything from being completely withdrawn, depressed. A lot of children exhibit anxiety, psychosomatic things such as stomach aches, bedwetting, headaches. And then we see some of the more obvious characteristics, which would be aggression, acting out behaviors, trouble in school, hitting siblings, hitting other friends. It used to be that it was thought of that the young women, girls, would exhibit more of the internalized problems, such as depression and anxiety, and the boys would have the acting out behaviors such as aggression, hitting, hostility. However, that's changed now, and we see a lot more young women, girls as they get into their teenagers, that are acting out physically and aggressively with peers, with siblings, with parents sometimes. And a lot of young men now who are exhibiting signs of depression, have a lot of anxiety, and other complaints.
Hitting isn't okay, we all know that. So you can almost, it's easier for the kids to see that physical abuse is not okay. It's easier for them to understand because it's right there. Verbal abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, that's not so easy. Because where are you going to put the Band-Aid on the inside?
Think of every good virtue or characteristic or trait that you would want a child to have if they were brought up in a loving, nurturing home, and then think of the opposite. You know, if that's where the arrow points, take a look at where the feathers are. So these children as adults are frightened. They're untrusting. They are terrified of intimacy.
Experts say art created by children reveals what is going on emotionally. These are paintings and drawings that were created by students on nearby Shelter Island.
This is a drawing of a 5-year-old boy who had just been physically abused by his father. It had occurred about 3 days prior to our session. And when we were drawing, I said, let's draw our family. Let's draw what it's like in your living room. And in this drawing, he drew a picture of his father, who has a cocaine addiction, hitting him in the face with a closed fist. And in asking him to describe what happened, he said, well, he's mean, he's nice, he's mean again, which is indicative of somebody who has a chemical addiction, you know, as they go through withdrawals and then they use the drug again. He also said that I have to be sure to tell my mom that she can't go back to him again. You know, here at 5, he was taking the role of protector for his mother. Here he was beaten, but he needed to protect his mother. And in the children I work with, oftentimes I see the children taking over a parentified role with the victim in the house, be it the parent or sometimes siblings.
An adult child from a dysfunctional home, an unhappy, violent home, becomes addicted to love because he never had it, craved it, never felt it. You have to feel warm and safe and held to be loved. It isn't just saying it. You have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And so when that young woman or that young man starts to reach adolescence and after, it's almost like turned loose in the world to search for love, like being turned loose in the Mojave Desert with no water, having an idea that water would help you, but then finding the water and being afraid to drink it. Being afraid, the intimacy is sought after, but terrifying at the same time.
There's a lot of evidence that violence is learned behavior, which you can learn in your home and learn from television and all of that. But it's not a simple matter of determinism. There's still a choice involved. You learn that behavior works, but you still make a choice to use it or not to use it. So just because a person has been abused, that doesn't give them the excuse to turn around and abuse somebody else.
When is an abused woman at highest risk?
I told him to stop because I was thinking more of the children. So I said, if you don't stop, I'm going to call 911. And he says, you call 911, a body's going to be taken out of here.
Our common advice to battered women is that they should just leave. And it's our common way of blaming battered women. Why doesn't she just leave? Well, of course, leaving is the most dangerous time. And something like 3/4 of the women who actually become victims of what we like to call spousal homicide are women who are separated or divorced or single. In other words, they're the women who have left.
So if I were going to leave, I was going to leave on whatever I had in my pocket and whatever I could leave with. And it had to be soon, because if he knew I was going to leave, then he would hunt me down, and I was in danger.
I just kept looking at his face, and I saw the anger there. I knew one of us is really going to be dead tonight.
Because he's gotten his identity, his sense of power, his sense of who he is from his ability to control that woman. And when she's gone, he's got nothing left. So that's when a man will say, if I can't have you, nobody can, and he'll follow through on that. That's when he'll go and kill her, and very often kill himself as well.
How many women are murdered by their husbands or boyfriends?
According to the FBI, of all women who are murdered in the United States, over 29% are murdered by their husbands or boyfriends.
I needed to stop this. I needed to get out of this relationship. Not only was my life in danger, but some of my children.
I knew it. I knew that was it. That was the point that I said, if he kills me, he's going to either kill my kids, something's going to happen, but I know my kids can't survive without me. So I flew out of there and I went into a shelter.
The shelter Angelina and her 3 children went to was the Retreat, located 100 miles east of New York City in East Hampton. The Retreat was started in 1986 and is the result of 20 years of experience in the women's shelter movement in the U.S. Their work serves as a model for other communities who are just beginning to address the problem of domestic violence.
The mission of the Retreat is to stop domestic violence on the east end of Long Island. It's also to provide safety and support services, to educate the community, and to work with the criminal justice system to hold offenders accountable.
Where we are now is the administrative office for retreat. All of the residential services are run through here. We have the hotline, which runs 24 hours. We have advocacy services, and we have counseling, both for adults and children. And all of these services are free and confidential. We also do all of our interface through with the community here. If there are donations that would like to be given to the retreat, they're dropped off here. The shelter is a secure and secret location, and we keep it that way for obvious reasons. When the women call, the first people that they talk to are hotline counselors.
This call came in Monday after the Super Bowl game, a day many domestic violence experts say is the busiest for hotlines.
I'm concerned for your physical safety. He says he's going to kill you. I have to believe him. You know, that's my job, is to kind of highlight for you the words that he used to you. I'm going to cut your throat means that he's thought about it. It's possible he might do it. He might be really sorry afterwards, but he still might do it. And I want you to hear your own words. This is what came out of your mouth. This is what he's saying to you. And it's really important that you hear yourself. This man is very, very dangerous. He's dangerous to you, and he's dangerous to your children.
Our shelter is an 18-bed facility. A woman is permitted to stay there for 90 days. If, for some reason, we're working on housing or employment, and she runs through those 90 days, we can get an extension of 45 days to work on whatever it is we're working on. But basically it's a 90-day stay, and they're able to decorate their rooms and keep their rooms as they would like, and usually that's the first and only thing that they've had that has not been violated. So that begins the growing and the healing process.
First of all, you're just trying to have them hold on to life. You're just having them hold on to life, and I know what that feels like. And then slowly, you know, we through use of videotapes where other women can tell their story. Certainly members of my staff, besides myself, have been battered women, and we can use ourselves in that way to reach out and try to give that hope.
And for a long time, we have worked to develop shelters, to get more of them, to get more safe homes. But we're at a point in history right now where that's not enough. It's no longer enough to provide safety and support to victims of domestic violence. We have to stop it.
I mean, all women come in with broken arms, broken legs, broken ribs, floating ribs.
But you know, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that the woman is the victim, and yet it's the woman who has to leave her home. So I think we also have to be looking at other ways to exclude the batterer and keep that woman and her children in her own home environment, and treat the batterer seriously in court and in jail so that woman doesn't have to come to our shelter.
Where does the system fail?
I can say I spent more days in the hospital and in hiding than he ever did in jail. I would hide before court dates. He would be released in bail, and I would hide between that bail date to the court date. And I would have to uproot my children and find a place to stay, find a safe house or a hotel where I could hide, where he wouldn't intimidate me into dropping the charges.
And the first thing I always ask is, are you safe and are your children safe? And then walk them through the process with filing police report with the police department in their vicinity. And then walking them through getting an order of protection and getting them to understand what their rights are, what they're entitled to.
Court is a very intimidating situation, so when you have somebody who has gone through that process many times and can alleviate that anxiety, that's very important. Very often the abuser is there, and the abuser will try to get the woman's attention or do things to throw her off balance. And if she's with somebody who she knows is supporting her, that's of tremendous support.
Orders of protection can work very well if they are enforced, and if men know that orders of protection are going to be enforced. Otherwise, they're just pieces of paper. And one of the things that men have learned is that many jurisdictions, and Suffolk County has been one of them, historically, orders of protection have been just that, pieces of paper.
The prerequisite for the order is that a criminal complaint be filed with the police. Now, the police will take that complaint if they think there's merit to it. So they have already screened that person for us. Once there's a charge, and they have decided that there's enough evidence to support that charge, then the person has the right to come here. They can't come here until they've made that step. Right. Having done that, we will grant ex parte orders, that's called one side only, so that this woman, man comes in on their own without the defendant and says, I need protection because, and then lays out the facts. Once I see that there's a criminal complaint and I look at it, if I think it's necessary, I'll grant it.
Getting that order of protection does a number of things. First of all, it makes that woman step out of the privacy of her home and take a very public step. And sometimes that's the first time that she is able to say to her batterer, enough, you're not going to do this to me anymore. And by going public, she is able to get the support of the judicial system, advocates at the retreat, and other people to help her so that she's not alone.
The part of the system that doesn't work is the part that is supposed to deal with the batterers. We have avoided confronting the fact that what batterers are doing is committing crimes of assault, that they are criminals. And if we were talking about any other kind of crime, it would be quite clear to us that the way you try to combat that crime is by catching the criminals and punishing them and locking them up. That's the one thing that we have systematically tried to avoid doing in this country.
The Batterers. Every week at Town Hall in Southampton, a group of male batterers meet with counselors from the retreat to break their silence and change their patterns of violent behavior. For some, attendance is court-mandated.
Let me ask this question. Was anybody in this group tempted this week by any kind of anger or rage at the woman in their life?
I put my hand on her neck and asked her if she wanted to die.
And you have no self-discipline?
Yes.
And you broke the law? She didn't break the law. You broke the law?
Yes.
You broke this order of protection twice now. And I don't know whether you're going to come back to group or not, or whether you're going to go to jail. In jail, you'll learn discipline.
I've been in jail, I've been in the Army. I thought I learned discipline, I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I have a problem with authority. I have a problem with being controlled by people, by government, by courts.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it's repetition and a lot of it's education. We keep repeating the same kinds of things, going over the incidents themselves and isolating them. The focus is that it's really against the law, that you cannot hit women no matter what they do.
And what you're telling this counselor is that you're going to go back out and beat the shit out of this woman again. That's what this wimpy little expression of, I don't know why, I don't know how, I don't know what to do about it, I don't know what discipline means, bullshit. You broke the law, and now you're playing this little game that you play with your wife. I don't know why I did it, I don't know how it happened, I got a real bad problem. It doesn't wash here. You're a very powerful, shrewd young man. And you know why you did it, and you know you're going to do it again, and you're playing a game. This gentleman comes from a home where there was no communication, and when his parents were angry at him, they cut him off. They didn't speak to him. And he just really doesn't know how to speak. And so what he did is he uses his power, his physical power.
You sound like a guy that has no power over himself, and you have power. One of the things you learn here is that you can actually change. You can change your behavior. This is learned behavior. You weren't born this way. You've learned this, and you better unlearn it.
There's a common belief that this is learned behavior, and that many children learn violence by growing up in violent homes. But it's not a simple one-to-one correspondence.
I wouldn't want anyone to think that this is a way of someone getting off. This program is designed to have the batterer confront the behavior. And it is not coddling. It's not hand-holding. This is a behavior modification program that's designed to change this person's operating procedures, and that's it. And if they fail to come to the sessions, then they have to face one of the judges here and the consequences, and that's understood.
Sending a man to a batterers program alone is never going to stop the problem. That's why it's important that we have to hold offenders accountable. We have to make sure that when those men go to court, that they are dealt with seriously, because battering is a crime and it must be taken seriously. We've seen in our work that if there is quick, swift, and really harsh penalties early on, that alone might be enough to stop the battering. But if men go into court and they've given a slap on the hand or they're sent home to think about their behavior and nothing else happens, I can assure you the battering continues.
How can we break the conspiracy of silence?
Cut through that denial, confront it, take the risk. Take the risk and say, I don't care what somebody wants to say about me. This is wrong. I can't allow this. This is unacceptable behavior.
I don't know why, but I wasn't focusing on myself. And I didn't feel like I had any worth. You know, I felt like this was the only man that would ever love me like he loves me. And I felt that that somehow I can control it, but I know different now. I know that the only thing that I can control is myself and my actions and what I do and what I want to be in. And I can't control anything else. So in hindsight, I can say that, no, he didn't love me. He was obsessed and he wanted to control me.
And I remember being so depressed and alone and thinking I'm the only one going through this. And so I think women need to know you're not the only one and that there is a way out.
You have to be able to take a chance and to reach out and believe that there are people out there that will help you, and trust them. That's another thing. Trusting anybody is very difficult. You have to trust that. You have to believe that what you think inside of your head, deep down inside your head and your heart, is true and it's real, that you are worthwhile.
You feel like you are in a box and there's no way out, you know? But there are ways out. I think education is the main one.
I need to break that cycle, and it's hard to do. It's hard when you've done this for so long. You're afraid of the change. You don't know what to expect. A lot of times I feel that I'm just gonna fail.
And that's why I say that self-esteem is so important to understand, to heal yourself first, before you move on to get housing, before you move on to get a job, before you move on to get childcare. That it's so important to know who you are and to take care of yourself and to heal your soul. Because the wounds of, the internal wounds are so much greater than any outside wound that we'll ever see when it comes to a woman who has been a victim of domestic violence. They're very, very deep. And if we talk about where we have to start there with healing that individual.
You have to recognize what underlies battering. What underlies it is this misogyny. So that any kind of education program, and the earlier it started, the better, that teaches equality and that teaches that women are people too, is going to have a good effect towards combating battering.
You know, kids learn much more from their peers than they ever will from me. And when I see kids in a group where we're talking about feelings and where it's not okay to hit, it's not okay to say mean, nasty things to other people, and when you see them sharing that with other peers, teaching that to other children, that's really one of the high points for me. It's not okay for anyone to hurt you, and it's not okay for anyone to say anything abusive to you. And it's certainly not okay for anyone to touch you in any place that you're not comfortable them touching you. And there's a very big word for that, and that is N-O, no.
For young girls, they need to know how to say no safely and how to avoid abusive relationships. They need to know that there are early warning signs in relationships that they can see at a very young age. Right now we have about 8 young women that we're seeing as part of our client load, and 6 of those women are victims of domestic violence. One young woman is being stalked by a former boyfriend. And sometimes young girls, they think that the kind of obsessive, jealous attention that a young man might pay towards them is a sign of love, or it's an indication that he really cares about her. And what we have to say is, that's not what it's all about.
Unfortunately, the message that often gets sent to kids in homes, either when they witness battering, or when they are battered or abused themselves, or even when they are spanked, when they are given physical discipline, the message they learn is that hitting someone is a good way of solving a problem and making the other person do what you want that person to do. And they learn that the people who do that are mostly grown-ups, mostly men, and that the appropriate targets are women and kids.
You know, I tell a lot of these teenage girls that come up to me, I tell them, you know, you have to have respect in your relationships. You don't deserve to be talked down to. You should, if somebody starts speaking down to you and telling you you're fat or you're ugly or something like that, you don't need that person in your life. Get rid of the negative in your life and move ahead to positive.
Fortunately, many women do leave their batterers and break the silence. Terry Tumania and her children have started a new life, one very different from their violent past.
I think we're much better off right now than we ever have been. They have a chance, my children have a chance of having a happy life, a fulfilling life, that they don't have any fears. They don't have to worry about what happens to mommy and what can happen to them. Getting out of the situation and becoming stable and secure and in our lives will make a difference. Will make all the difference in the world. It gives them a chance that I never had.
Kathy Raymond is happy now. She has remarried and lives a thriving life without fear. She is also involved with helping others who are victims of incest and domestic violence. Angelina Baez is continuing her education with the hopes of finding a good job. Her 3 children are now safe and happy.
You feel embarrassed and ashamed because you have, you know, especially you start thinking back all the times that he has hit you, all the times, all the embarrassments and all the lies that you've told. It's so hard and it's terrible. And it's hard for you to regain yourself again. You have to start from scratch, but you also have to believe in yourself. Don't concentrate on him anymore. That's his problem.
Kathy Fusco is remarried and living happily without abuse. She is going for her bachelor's degree in social work, and she volunteers for the Victims Information Bureau. Kathy helps battered women by interning as a court advocate for the retreat. Crystal Long went through the retreat shelter and counseling program and doesn't live in fear anymore. She's now working a steady job and lives without abuse.
That education that they gave me actually saved my life.
Bernadette Hackett has completed her postmaster's program in social work clinical practice and is currently in private practice and helps many battered women and children through her own experiences.
It's really hard to sit down and tell people about this stuff, and I've gotten through so that I'm not embarrassed by it anymore. But I don't know how it'll affect my kids to see this. But I thought about that, and I thought, you know, they do know what was going on. And I remember being so depressed and alone, thinking I'm the only one going through this. And so I think women need to know you're not the only one, and that there is a way out, and you're not stupid, and you're not dumb, and you can go out there, and you can get an education.
The Batterers group works for some, but not for all. Scott Neistat is abiding by an order of protection and appears to have made a commitment to make changes in his behavior. He continues to attend the Batterers group, but he still displays abusive behavior to control his wife while picking up his children prior to visitation. Mary Ann Walsh. Her whereabouts are now unknown. People who know her believe she moved back with her batterer.
And so if you can get them to understand that pushing and shoving and jealousy and tearing up people's property is a violation of an individual, and if you can get them to understand that early on, that they grow up understanding that and knowing that, and they also grow up being able to stand up when they see adults behaving in that manner to say that's not okay.
What a child does is he places his hand on a piece of paper. He outlines his hand, traces his hand, colors it in whatever color he wants to, and writes whatever saying, and he takes a pledge. Hands are not for hitting. My hand will not commit violence. And it's so wonderful. We did it in our house. That's how I know. And this was 5 months ago that I did it with the kids. And they still turn around and say, stop. Hands are not for hitting. So it's a program that should go into schools starting from kindergarten to the 6th grade. And I just think the world of it. I think it's great.
Everybody has to understand what domestic violence is and what their role is in helping stop it. And we need to be speaking to everybody in the community that we can to let them know the problem exists, that it's right here, and that there are very specific things that they can do to stop, to serve as role models to people, to talk to people in their own family, to educate their children about domestic violence, about power and control, about how important it is to treat each other with respect and with care and with dignity, and that it's not about hitting and slapping and kicking people to get them to do what you want them to do, that as a society, as a community, we must find other ways to stop domestic violence.
So it all comes down not to what her mind is like or even what her social circumstances are like. It all comes down to what are we doing about him? How can we stop him? And it's up to us to do it. It's up to the whole community to do it. It's not up to her. Why is this the only crime in America that we leave up to the victim to solve?
Breaking the conspiracy of silence begins with bringing the problem to light and discussing these crimes openly, knowing there is help. Violence is unacceptable. If we subscribed to the idea that family is the cornerstone of our society, then family violence is no longer just a family issue. It is a national problem. It is criminal behavior and can no longer be tolerated. We must learn to resolve our conflicts peacefully if we want our children and their children to live in a civilized world. If you are a victim of domestic violence, seek help from friends, family, professionals. Your local police will refer you to a hotline and a shelter. You are not alone with your problem. No one deserves to be abused. If someone you know needs help, don't ignore them. Break the conspiracy of silence.